The flip side is we have had a pretty shit time, especially here in Australia and in Victoria. I mean, we all dealt with COVID. We all dealt with lockdowns right around the world. Victoria had the worst lockdowns, the longest lockdowns, the most severe lockdowns in the world. We ran very much the closest thing to a police state that anyone has ever seen. We had curfews in which police, if you were out over a certain time at night, you would be fined and potentially, locked up. So we had parks, kids' playgrounds that were chained up so kids couldn't go to a playground. We had the most serious, as I say, lockdowns. And that was very, very traumatic.
And for the length of
lockdowns. Yeah, more than that. Right. So we had the longest lockdowns, the most severe lockdowns. But even then, as the local MP, I remember the Friday night after 5 p.m. sitting at my computer and getting an email from the Premier's office to say, you will not be able to go back to your office as a local MP. And people had already left, and they didn't even have their laptops with them. So it was kind of, you have to work from home even as an MP. And then a few of us started ringing around and said, this is nuts. I was dealing with the time. I had a phone call, someone on hold and an email. Somebody was dealing, it's pretty tragic, but the one was dealing with somebody that was stuck overseas. There were issues that somebody was dying. It was like really serious stuff that was happening. And I couldn't have done that from home. So we reacted to a point where we just said, no, we're coming to work. And so finally the government caved in and we were able to work from the office and have our staff at home, but the MPs would come in, answer the calls and work during the lockdown periods. But that was very traumatic. And I remember the kind of decisions that we were dealing with every single day, and you'd come home 10 o'clock every night exhausted. And this went on for nearly 2 years, right? So I thought after that period that I'll never experience that thing again. And gives me PTSD even thinking about that. It was one of the worst times ever that we all dealt with. But, everyone had their issues. But as a member of parliament, we didn't have too many people that we could talk to. We had to support everyone else. So then dealing with that, and then all of a sudden we had, as you know, October 7, 2023, the worst ever terrorist attack in Israel, and the reverb back for the Jewish community in the diaspora. Me having the largest Jewish community in Australia, in Caulfield, over 30,000 people, that we had to support. And so that kind of set me back into that mode where I was after COVID, even more so. So it was the threats, the hate, businesses being targeted, school kids being targeted, synagogues being firebombed, and it was all just happening and just spiraling worse and worse and worse. Weekly protests, government doing nothing. And I remember so many things, and it was, we've got a very well organised Jewish community, but it seemed like all roads led to their local MP. And I was getting calls every day and dealing with stuff every day and trying to organise logistics of peace rallies and vigils and all that stuff where it was just, they expected me to organise it. And we did it. And, but it was exhausting. And I remember just after going through months of just going around the community and hugging people, giving them the energy, but I got to the point where I was out of hugs. There was only so much love you could give people, and you just go home and you just collapse. Just think, how you have to get up the next day and deal with it again. And then Bondi happened, which was the next level. And then we saw Bondi, which was in Sydney, we're in Melbourne. But then there were a lot of people from Melbourne affected, and going up to Sydney with the Russian Jewish community, which it was a Russian synagogue that was impacted, that organised Bondi. So I was with the Russian community in Melbourne, and then visiting people that lost loved ones, going to the hospitals, seeing people that, lost their father and they were shot themselves, and just experiencing all of that. And it was just like trauma after trauma after trauma. So it's been, this is really localised, and this is obviously being a Jew, but being representative of other Jews, and then having to deal with that, and then having to translate that to other Jews. So it's been really, really hard.
First of all, that statement is just really, I mean, you gave me goosebumps while you were going through that timeline. I think a lot of people think about the since COVID era, especially as Jews, who literally have had those jumps, but you've sat in leadership position throughout all of that. And that intensity, I just, want to acknowledge how serious that is. And I want to ask,